looked at numbers. We've heard student voices, we've read the comments of students, and we've read the comments from teachers in the longitudinal survey. And these are the students that you are touching. And these are numbers, these are words, but in your minds, you have to be thinking about those students in your own programs who have grown so much and have gone on to fulfill the Startalk dream. We've generated that interest. The student has gone on to graduate study, and we now have those students working for the federal government using their languages, teaching others, training teachers to teach others, and they're all amazing stories, but it's really good to hear from one person who's had that experience, and I'm not going to steal any of Matt's thunder by talking about his past, because he's going to tell you all about how this happened for him. But Matt is a Startalk student, and here is his story.
女士们、先生们，早上好！我的名字叫高正远，我今天很荣幸能够站到这里，与各位分享我和新谈的不解之缘。I thought we were doing 90% target language. Is that going to be a problem? Maybe we'll do this we'll make it a little more comprehensible for everyone who doesn't speak Chinese. My name is Matt. I am 23 years old, and once upon a time, I was a Startalk student. So I am going to talk to you a little bit about how I ended up at Startalk, where Startalk took me, and what that might have to do with all of you who are sitting here in our audience today. But before that, you've been sitting for a long time, so I'm going to ask that everyone in the audience stands up. And you can stretch in whatever manner you feel most comfortable in all of your fancy clothes. You have 10 seconds, and I will count for you in Chinese. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Please be seated. Thank you. I'm going to move this up a little bit. Okay. So what we do at Startalk, as all of you know, I know I'm preaching to the choir a little bit, is we teach people. And this is a really powerful quote that I found about something that I feel very strongly about, which is being a teacher. The essence of teaching is to make learning contagious, to have one idea spark another. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is the sparks that have sort of lit the way in my journey in Startalk and beyond. The first one happened a long time ago, and I'm not sure if I'm even allowed to say that because I'm only 23, but a long-ish time ago, a long time for me. As you might have seen in my fun fact in our Startalk staff introduction, I grew up bilingual and bicultural by accident. And that's a kind of a long story. My parents don't speak Spanish, but my younger brother and I both grew up speaking Spanish with our next-door neighbor who took care of us for many, many years when we were young kids. So I was really lucky and discovered a love for language learning very early because my brother and I realized when we were 4 and 3 or 5 and 3 that we could talk about anything we wanted in front of my parents, and there was nothing they could do about it. Brother's secret language, it was the coolest thing. You might be wondering, though, what Spanish has to do with Startalk and what that has to do with why I'm here. And I will surprise you by saying that it has everything to do with Startalk because my Spanish teacher, when I was a kid, when I was 9, moved to China. And they were like aunt and uncle, they were like family to me. So when they moved to China, my parents decided that my brother and I were old enough for our first international trip. So at 9 years old, I had my second spark, which was my trip to China. And as you can see, in China, it did not take me very long to find my rightful place on the throne. But you combine this trip in 2004 with the fact that, was it 2004? I don't remember. Early 2000s, with the fact that when I came back to the United States, I happened to have a 5th grade teacher who was a Chinese Kung Fu teacher in his spare time. And so when I was 11, I started learning Chinese martial arts. I had just been to China. And some of you probably have kids and they probably have career aspirations. When I was 11, my career aspiration was I was going to be a Chinese medicine doctor and a Kung Fu 师傅. I was determined to teach people Kung Fu and heal their injuries. That was my goal in life as an 11-year-old. But what I didn't know at age 11 was that Chinese medicine is also real medicine. You know, you have to go to med school and you have to have a license. No. I assumed it was something more like you eat, you know, herbal medicine and it's kind of like magic, you know, acupuncture and the cups and all this stuff. So I was set that I was going to be a Chinese medicine doctor. So to that end, I told my parents one day at 11 years old that I was going to learn Chinese. And luckily for me, my mom supported the dream. So the third spark in my journey, who I owe so much to, is my childhood Chinese teacher, He Jingping, who is from Tianjin. So you might hear, those of you who speak Chinese and can differentiate the accent, that I have a very strong Jingqiang, Beijing accent. Sorry. But the third spark came from her. I started studying Chinese with her when I was 11. And when I was 13, she told my mom about this free summer program where I could go learn Chinese. And my mom is a bit of a tiger mom. My Chinese teacher used to say that she was Chinese in her past life. But she signed me up with no questions asked for a Startalk program when I was 13 years old. So, once upon a time, in 2008, I was a Startalk student for the very first time. I sat in a classroom and learned Chinese with peers for the first time. Otherwise, I had been learning it in a one-on-one sort of tutor environment. And in 2009, which was my second year at Startalk, my last year as a student, I was in the heritage class because I could speak and listen pretty well in Chinese, but I couldn't read and write very well. And I learned back then, even though I didn't have a name for it, how important it is to have comprehensible input, and how frustrating, rewarding, yes, but also frustrating sometimes that language learning can be. Why? Because my Chinese teacher only talked about herself in the third person. So I spent the entire first week of 3 weeks in this class with all heritage speakers who seemed to know what was going on all the time. I did not. And she said, Chen Lao Shi, which means Miss Chen, wants you to do this. Or give this to Chen Lao Shi. So here I am grabbing my stuff and I'm like, where is she? And every time I would ask these questions, she would kind of look at me and be like, I don't understand your sense of humor. I'm not joking, but anyway. So I was a Startalk student for 2 years, and at age 15, I proficiency'd out of this program that, as many Startalk programs are, was focused more on the novice, intermediate, low range. But I was only 15, so you can't legally work in North Carolina when you're 15. You can't be paid to be employed. So this Startalk program asked me to come back as a volunteer teacher's assistant. And I volunteered. I spent a couple weeks of my summer teaching a Chinese cooking class to kids that were, 2 years younger than me in Chinese. And that's sort of in 2010 where I decided that teaching might be the thing for me. I thought once upon a time that I was going to be this international consultant. I got over my Chinese medicine dream pretty early. And then I was going to be a consultant or I was going to do business. But then I was like, I can't even do math. How am I going to do business? So I discovered teaching. In 2011, I was paid to be a teacher's assistant for the first time at this very same Startalk program, which is, I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. I guess I didn't say that. That's where it was. Go Charlotte. In 2011, 2012, and 2013, I was a teacher's assistant at this same Startalk program. And then, after I studied abroad for the first time, which we'll talk about in a minute, in 2014, I came back that summer, and I was a lead teacher at this Startalk program for the first time. So I made the transition from student to volunteer to teacher's assistant to I have to write all of these lesson plans. I know you feel my pain, right? But I have gone back to that summer program. Even now, I don't live in North Carolina anymore, but I go back every summer and I teach Chinese to the same kids in the same building. And I can sit there and look at them, much like I'm standing in front of all of you today, and say, I really was sitting right there. Literally in that seat, that was me, 9 years ago. And if I can do it, and I can't even do math, you can do it. So that led me to yet another spark. We talk about language learning with all these different interesting metaphors. One of my favorites, though, is that language learning is like a key, and it opens a lot of doors for you, right? So Startalk led me to make certain choices about my academics. I decided to go to undergraduate school and study Hispanic Linguistics and study Chinese, because I was determined to be a language teacher. So that was sort of my first big step after Startalk. I decided while I was in undergraduate school that I needed to go study abroad, because it's not enough to be curious and be passionate and be interested in a classroom. Eventually you get tired of reading about how cool the Great Wall of China is, and you're like, I'm going there. So I got to study abroad. And language learning being that key, the doors that it opened for me at least were simple ones that you might think of, like traveling to really cool places, a la the Great Wall of China, the old tea trading route in southwestern China. Tea is my favorite thing ever if you know anything about me. When you learn another language, you get to eat amazing food. And you don't know the names in English, and you go to a Chinese restaurant in the United States, and what you don't know if you don't speak Chinese is that most Chinese restaurants have two menus. They have a Chinese menu and an English menu. They bring you the English menu, Kung Pao chicken, General Tso's chicken, and I'm like, can I have the real menu, please? I want this stuff, right? So you get to eat amazing food when you travel. But even more, on a less superficial level, you get to make connections with people who otherwise you might never have been able to establish any kind of a relationship with. And even if you could establish a relationship, it would be very superficial. It would be food and traveling and ha ha ha, this is so fun. But you're able to establish friendships with people who don't speak your language, who don't share your cultural references, who don't get your jokes because you joke about things that they've never heard of. And these are people who I still stay in touch with despite a 12-hour time difference on Chinese social media, and who I have developed friendships with that have lasted 5-6 years since my first time back in China. Another thing we talk about in Startalk in the classroom a lot is cultural products, practices, and perspectives, right? But one of the most important things that I learned in language learning is that cultural products and practices and perspectives aren't permanent or stationary, and they don't live in one place. The coolest thing about when you travel and experience things, even when you don't leave the United States, in your hometown, when you go to a Startalk program and drink Chinese tea for the first time, for example, you can take that stuff home with you. It becomes a part of who you are. It becomes a part of your life. In the upper left-hand corner, that is Chinese food that I made in my kitchen. The middle picture is in Arlington, Virginia, at my favorite hot pot restaurant that I've discovered in my hometown where I live now. And in the bottom right-hand corner, if you're Chinese, you might recognize that that is Chinese medicine. And right before I went to compete at the China Bridge Hanyu Chao competition my senior year of college, I had the worst throat ache in the world, and I couldn't even talk. My teacher from Tianjin gave me this little bottle of awful medicine and said, eat these. Next day, fine. Cultural products, right? There's power there. Again, another beautiful thing, a door that language learning opens up, is making memories. And sometimes those memories include making a fool of yourself, which is when, for example, I translated the song Single Ladies by Beyonce into Chinese, and my classmates and I performed that on our very last day in China for our entire Chinese program, in Chinese. There is a video, no, you can't see it. So, once upon a time, China led me to Startalk. And then I stayed at Startalk for years and years and years and years and years, and Startalk led me back to China 3 different times during my time in undergraduate school. So once upon a time, what was this spark of interest, of curiosity, of passion has now become this blazing fire of, I always talk about this and this is all I ever do. But I love it. And what I learned traveling and what I learned in my experiences watching people teach, learning how to teach, exploring teaching on my own, is that you take all of these things that you bring with you, your story, your personal experiences, and you bring them back to your classroom. And those things that you show and share with your students light their fires and make them decide that this is what I want to do, this matters to me, I care about this. At least that's how it happened to me. And these are pictures from my Startalk classroom this past summer where we were looking at cultural products, practices, and perspectives. You might think that my Startalk journey ends in the classroom, but as you sort of already saw in our staff video, that's not the case. I am now a graduate assistant at the National Foreign Language Center, which is the home of Startalk. And if you like The Wizard of Oz, what that really means is I sort of followed the yellow brick road all the way to the Emerald City, and now I get to see the man behind the curtain. And it's not just one man, it's a lot of people, and they do an incredible amount of hard work to make this happen. So before I go on, can we thank the NFLC for everything that they do? And you might be wondering what a graduate assistant is, and that's a really fancy word in English that means I get paid to work for Startalk and to go to school for free. In addition to working at the NFLC part-time right now, I am getting my master's in second language acquisition at the University of Maryland. But just like at this conference, I told Nicole the other day, we were talking about my work at the NFLC, and she says that every project that comes up, I go ask her, can I do that? And I'm sure I drive her nuts, but it's true, because at the NFLC, I feel like a kid in a candy store. Every time there's a new project, I'm like, oh, I want to do that. That sounds cool. That sounds interesting. And there have been more times than I'm willing to admit on camera and in front of all of you that people have invited me to work on a project, and I've been very composed, yes, I would like to work on that. And I turn the corner, and I'm like, yes! But, you know, I get to see Startalk now for the first time, starting in May of this year, at the macro level. Instead of being in this one program and knowing what impact it had on me personally, and seeing what impact it had on my classmates who became my students, I now get to see what impact it has on 56,000 students a year, and that, I'm not even sure how to describe that, and I can speak 5 languages. So, Startalk gave me a college, you know, it inspired me to go to college at a particular place and study a particular thing. It inspired me to go abroad, and now I'm getting my graduate degree and working for Startalk, and like, don't even feel like I go to work every day. And the road doesn't end there. But I think it's also important to address, because people say, you know, her Chinese is so good. And I say, I know, your Chinese is really good too. And then they look at me and go, hmm. But language learning is a powerful, incredible, wonderful journey, but it's not without its difficult moments, right? It's not without its frustration, both as a teacher and as a student, when you thought your input was comprehensible and they look at you like, huh? And when Chen Laoshi says, go give your paper to Chen Laoshi, and I go, where is she? Right? So something that someone shared with me not that long ago that I now share with every student that passes through my classroom. Oh, I forgot my last metaphor. This is how I feel working at the NFLC. You have spark, you have fire, now we're adding oil to the fire. But this is something someone shared with me not that long ago, and I think it has a very powerful message, and I'm gonna read it to save you the time. If you wanna learn a language, learn it. Don't be scared if the grammar is difficult. We like to say in our critical languages that the grammar is difficult, that this language is hard. Don't be scared if the language is difficult. If the sounds give your tongue a hernia, the writing system is cumbersome, or there are more empty beer cans in your house than there are speakers of that language. The worst thing that can happen is that you don't get it. The best thing that can happen is that you see inside someone else's heart, someone else's soul. And most precious of all, a whole group, perhaps billions of people, cease to be cardboard cutouts and magically turn into humans with problems you can relate to, good news they can celebrate with you, business to conduct, and untranslatable wisdom to share. For all you know, the most powerful words you will ever say, the last goodbyes, the first life-changing I love you, the first words you'll ever say to your newborn child. For all you know, these things aren't meant to be said in English. If you want to learn a language, learn it. Every day you choose not to, you choose to forsake those irreplaceable moments that you'll never share with irreplaceable people in your life that you'll never be able to meet in English. And as if, you know, going to college and deciding to be a teacher and now getting my grad school paid for to work for Startalk wasn't enough, another place that Startalk led me that relates very directly to one thing that we said here is when I went to China and studied abroad, I did the one thing that my Chinese teacher told me not to do. Don't go get a girlfriend. And my girlfriend, who we've been dating for 4 years now, and the first time that she told me, I love you, she told me in Chinese. She wrote it on my arm in Chinese. So you imagine I wouldn't even be in a relationship if I hadn't started learning Chinese. You see, you connect all the dots. And that's powerful stuff. So when Betsy first sent me an email and said, Matt, can I talk to you next time you're in the office? First thing I thought was, what did I do? I'm gonna get fired already. I haven't even made it through one semester. But that wasn't the case. She asked me to speak at this conference, and I was like, what could I possibly say to a room full of program directors, team leaders, site visitors, teachers, and my coworkers at the NFLC. I don't know anything about anything. I just started working at the NFLC. What can I possibly tell you that you don't already know? And I thought about that for a long time when I was planning this presentation, and what I finally realized in thinking about all of these sparks that have sort of been a part of my journey with Startalk is that you are the spark. The program directors run the programs, the teachers teach, the site visitors scare us a little bit. And they come and they inspect and they smile at you and you think, do they like me or are they like, you don't even have any idea? The team leaders mentor the programs. You know, we learn from each other in this amazing environment. But none of this would be possible without all of the people that are sitting in this room. There would be no reason for me to be on a stage talking to anyone about this if it wasn't for all of you. So the last thing that I think I can say, and I just hit my 20 minutes. Wow, I have never managed my time this well in my whole life. The last thing that I can say is thank you for everything that you do.
Isn't he amazing? So thank you, Sparks, and thank you for all the Matts you have created and that are doing things similar to what Matt is doing. Thank you.